B.HookedCrochet.com. I'm your host Brittany. In this video I will demonstrate how to crochet the Starburst Beret. This is a free pattern that's available at B.HookedCrochet.com, and you can get that link in the description below. To complete your beret, you will need approximately 160 yards of any worsted weight yarn. For this tutorial, I will be demonstrating using Caron Simply Soft in the color Pistachio. You also need a size 5mm crochet hook, a darning needle, and a pair of scissors. Before we jump into this pattern, I wanted to take a second and demonstrate what your beret should look like once it's finished. And in doing so, we're going to explain a little bit about this complex pattern that you see going on. You may look at this and think, how in the world would you even create something like this? And honestly, I thought the same thing. So we're basically going to be working in rounds, and we're going to start in the center here and work our way out. Now it's actually a little bit more easy than you might think, and I will say that it takes a lot of practice to get this pattern down and memorized. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to start with the very first star, and if you count the spokes of the star, or the flower if you prefer to call it that, then we should have 6. And now you see that they are clusters, so if you're really familiar with crochet you may recognize it right off the bat. We're going to be working in double crochet clusters. Okay, and we're going to be doing a little bit of fancy work in order to get, you know, one starburst here and then a complete one here and a complete one there. And so if you really take a look at this pattern, we have several completed starbursts, and we have to end up double crocheting clusters together. And so we'll go through this as slow as possible. You can also find the written instructions, but honestly I feel like you'll probably have more success with this pattern by watching the video demonstration. Go ahead and grab your yarn and let's get started. There are a couple of different ways that you can start off working in the round. We're going to be doing the alternate to the magic ring method, and we're going to start off by creating a slip knot. If you're more comfortable with doing the magic ring, just know that you can do that as well, but I'm going to demonstrate using this method. So once you've created your slip knot, go ahead and chain 3 and join with a slip stitch to that first chain right next to your slip knot. Okay, and to get yourself set up, I just like to pull open that ring. Now we need to chain 3, and we're going to be doing that in a few instances where we're making our double crochet clusters. So when we chain 3, just know that the stitch looks and feels a little bit different than when we don't. So keeping that in mind, we're going to create our first double crochet cluster. We need to yarn over, insert our hook into the center of our ring, and when you pull up the loop, you want to make sure you pull up, so let it run through your finger here, your yarn hand, and make sure you pull it up so that it's about the same height as your 3 chains. Then we'll yarn over and pull through 2. Then we need to repeat that because we're going to double crochet 3 together. Since the chaining of 3 is counting as 1, we've got our second, and then again pull up on that loop, yarn over and pull through 2. So in the case of having a chain 3 there, we're going to stop when we have 3 loops on our hook, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. So what we've done here is we've created just one of the spokes or one of the petals to the flower there, and now we need to work on one of these side clusters. So we're going to have them coming out from the center. We'll have 6 of them, but we also have some that are going to be bridging the 2 together. So we're working on that now. We're going to chain 3, and then we're going to be working this cluster in the very first chain. So that chain that's finished off that last cluster, Okay, and we're going to hold those loops on our hook. Now we're going to work on the next little spoke that's going to come out from the center. So we just yarn over, we're keeping those 3 loops on our hook, and then just make another double crochet cluster. So make sure we have 3 of those. So that's the first, and the second, and the third. Okay, and at this point you will have 6 loops on your hook. We'll go ahead and yarn over and pull through all 6 of those loops. And I like to make sure that's pulled relatively tight, and chain 1 to finish off the stitch. And when we chain 1, that's actually creating the next center for the star or the flower that's going to be coming from this portion right here, this direction. So when we finish that, we're ready to work on these sides. So if you're kind of seeing the pattern, we've got one coming out from the center, going to the side, another coming out from the center. So we need to create one going to the side. And we'll just chain 3. And then we'll be working into that chain that finished off that last stitch. Okay, and since we've got that ready, then we can just hold that in place, and now we'll start working on the next one coming out from the center. So make another double crochet cluster, and again you want to make sure that you're pulling up on your loops and that you're doing so consistently, because that is going to determine the gauge for your hat and how flat this is going to lay once you're all finished. Okay, when you've got 6 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through all 6, and chain 1. Next we just need to work on the next little bridge there, so one that's coming out from the side. And then going down into the center again. We can just take a second to count how many we have coming from the center. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. We need a total of 6, so we're just going to repeat. Okay, and once you have worked your 6th one coming out from the center, then we can go ahead, and to finish it off we just need to make the little bridge in between these, the first one and the last one. So we'll just do that the same. We'll chain 3 and we'll work the double crochet cluster, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through all 3, but instead of making the chain 1, we're simply going to slip stitch to this center ring right here. So we're not actually going into the chain or into the stitch. We want to go into what's going to be the center of this flower, so, or this star. We'll just slip stitch there into that circle. Now that we're finished with round 1, let's just go ahead and pull up on the working yarn, and we're going to work on the center here. So I told you we're doing the alternate to the magic ring method, so we're going to go ahead and close up the center of this starburst here. So it's pretty closed the way it is, but we're going to go ahead and feed the tail. So this is the tail from the slip knot that we created. And we're just going to work it around. So it's coming from this side, so I'm going to work the tail under these stitches and just go all the way around. And once you get it back around, then you can go ahead and just pull really tight on that tail and just keep going about one more time around if you've got a long enough tail. Okay, and once you get that finished, then we can just trim off the tail. So the cool thing about this pattern is that it's really repetitive for the starburst portion, and we actually don't have to increase necessarily. So we actually are increasing, but we're doing so in a way that doesn't really feel like the traditional increase. So we're basically at the point now where we have slip stitched round 1 together, and so we're ready to start on round 2. And we're just simply going to chain 3. And we're going to make a double crochet cluster into that same little circle where we slip stitched together. And then we're going to close that off just like we did before and chain 3. We're going to be working this very similarly, so we've got the one coming up, we're working on the one going out to the side, and we're going to be working that into the same space, the same chain that we were before. Okay, and when we've got those stitches on our hook, then we're going to come back down into the same circle or the same center where our first cluster was coming from. So make your double crochet cluster into that same space. Now once you've got that together and you have your 6 loops on your hook, just yarn over, pull through all 6, and chain 1. And from here we're ready to start the next side. So we've got one going up, over, and down. Now we're going to be working over, so we chain 3, and make your double crochet cluster. And here's the part where things get fun. So we have up, over, down, we have over, and then we're going to go down into this one, and then down into this one, and we have to keep all of these loops on our hook. So this first part isn't actually changing. So we've got the 3 there, we're going to work the next double crochet cluster, just like we've been doing. Okay, and when we have 6 loops on our hook, we're going to, instead of finishing it off, we're going to work into that next center there. So the next little ring that you see, and make another double crochet cluster. Okay, once you get finished with that, you'll have 9 loops on your hook. Then we'll yarn over Pull through all 9 of those loops, and again pull that fairly tight and chain 1 to finish it off. So we've just made basically 3 clusters there together, and that is basically the repeat for the entire pattern. Now you're probably thinking your head is spinning now, and it probably is a little bit, but once you do this pattern over and over, it will become second nature. So since the last thing we did was make a little piece going down, we're going to work over to the side. Okay, hold those on your hook, and then we're going to go down into the next circle there, the next little center, and make your double crochet cluster. Okay, and now we're going to stop here. We've got the 6 loops on our hook. We'll finish this off. Okay, and now this next time we're going to work where we've got the 3 together. So first we're going to make the piece coming out from the side, so the cluster that goes around. And then we're going to go down into this one here. So the same one that our last one came from, that our last cluster. Okay, and then we're going to find that next center and work the next double crochet cluster. So we're holding all of those loops. Okay, and when you have 9 loops on your hook, we can finish it off and chain 1. So let's take a step back and talk about this repeat. We've actually gone through the repeat 2 times now, but you just may not have noticed it, because if you're like me, initially I was getting completely lost in these clusters, and it actually looks a little bit different than what you might visualize if you were looking at a diagram. So basically we're working one up, over, and down, and then we have over and then down and down, but they're together. So I kind of said this in my head: up, over, down, over, 2 together, over, down, over, 2 together. And so you can come up with whatever way you can to try to memorize this pattern, or you can follow along with the video. I'll try to minimize cuts as much as possible, because I know this is a complex design that's actually not easy to come up with a written pattern for either. So just do the best you can. It actually took me 2 hats. I made 2 hats before I was able to just have this pattern memorized. So the last one we did was these 3 together, so I know I just need to do one over and one down. And then finish those off. So since I just had the 1 going down, I know that the next time I need to have 2 going down. So I'm going to start off with the side, and I need to have 2 coming down. So I'm going to work in this hole and in that hole. So first we'll work down here. And then we'll jump over and work into this one here. And then we'll finish it off. Now you can just follow along with me as I finish up round 2. When you've come to the end of the round, you might find yourself wondering what exactly you're supposed to do in order to finish this off. So what I like to do is just count the clusters that are coming out from each center. I know there's supposed to be 6 for every single flower, and so if I count these, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, so I know I need to have one more into that space. And again, I have to have the piece coming out from the side. So that basically tells me exactly what I need to do. I need to have the one from the side, and then I need to work one more time into that center. And then I'm simply going to finish it off by yarning over and pulling through all 6, but instead of chaining 1, I'm going to slip stitch to the center right here, so this little circle. So again, not going into the chain, not going into the stitch, but the center of that next flower, and then we'll just slip stitch that round together. So at the end of round 2, your piece should look something like this. And if it doesn't look perfect right away, like I said, this took me a lot of practice, so don't give up. It's a really cool design. So as I mentioned before, even though this pattern is a little complex, we actually don't have to worry about increasing for each of the rounds. And so basically what we did for round 2, we're going to do the exact same things for rounds 3 and 4. And the only difference is we're going to have more stitches because we're getting bigger as we go around. So I'll go through part of round 3 again, and hopefully you can just go ahead and pick right up along with me, and we'll get this finished before you know it. So I'm starting off by making my first double crochet cluster. As always, I'm just going to finish that off, and then we'll chain 3, and then we're going to work into that first chain there. So this is working on this side. So remember I said up, over, and down is how we start out. So we've got up, this will be over, and then we're going to work down into the same space. Okay, with those loops on your hook now, go ahead and finish that off and chain 1. So we've got the up, over, down. Now we're going to work on the over, and then we'll have 2 going down that we're actually crocheting together. So chain 3. Now we'll work on the piece coming out from the center here. And then we'll jump over into this next center and we'll work our next cluster there, all while keeping these loops on our hook. Now once you've got 9 loops on your hook, we'll just yarn over and pull through all 9 loops and chain 1. Now we're just going to start over with the over and down. So that's the over, now the down. And then finish it off. Now the over. And then we'll work down here and down here, working those together. And finish that off and repeat. Once you've reached the end of round 3, you want to make sure that you end up with a cluster going towards the side and one cluster coming down. And then we're going to join with this little center right here. So this was where we started off the round with the one going up and the one going over. So we want to make sure that we slip stitch into the center there. And that finishes off round 3. Round 4 is going to be exactly the same as round 3. The only difference that we're going to experience is our circle now at this point is much bigger, so we're going to be working more stitches, but we're going to work the exact same stitch pattern. And I'm not actually going to do that on the video, so go ahead and finish up round 4 exactly the way that we worked round 3. You can use that portion of the video as a reference if you need. And we'll meet back up and we'll start working then on the decreasing portion of the band. When you finished up round 4, your hat should look something like this. Now, one thing that is important to do before we move on to the next section is we want to measure the diameter of this, because as I mentioned before, everybody's gauge is going to be a little bit different with these clusters depending on how far you pull up your stitches. And so it's important to pull them up pretty far, because once you've reached the end of round 4, you should have 9 inches across. So your diameter should be 9 inches across. At this point, we're going to start working on the band and the decreasing section of the hat. And what we first have to do is make a single crochet border around the entire piece. So we want to chain 1, and we're going to count that as a single crochet. And what we want to do is make a single crochet around that first chain that we see, and then we're going to single crochet into that cluster stitch, and then we'll single crochet into the center of this half little starburst we have there. And we just want to repeat that. Now we've come back to a chain, so we just want to single crochet around the chain and into the cluster stitch and then into the center. And we're just going to repeat that around. When you've made it back around, you want to make sure that you make a single crochet into this very last stitch here. And then we're going to join with the slip stitch to that chain 1. Including your chain 1, at this point you need to have a total of 135 stitches. And that number is very important because we're going to be decreasing. We have to do so in a proportionate manner. To begin round 6, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to make a single crochet once into each of the next 6 stitches. So we're counting this chain 1 as a stitch, and we just need to make 6 more single crochets. And then we need to make a single crochet decrease. So we just insert our hook into the next stitch, yarn over and draw up a loop and keep that loop on your hook, insert it into the next stitch, draw up your loop, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. And now we'll make a 1 single crochet into each of the next 7 stitches. and then single crochet decrease over the next 2. And then we'll just repeat that all the way around. Single crochet into the first 7 and then a single crochet decrease. Once you've made it all the way back around, you want to make sure that your last stitch is a single crochet decrease, and then we can just go ahead and slip stitch to our chain 1 from the beginning of the round. Round 7 is a pretty easy one. We just need to make 1 double crochet into every stitch. So we're going to start off by chaining 3. And then we just want to double crochet 1 time into every stitch. Now we should have a total of 120 stitches, so you can keep track as you go along. Again, this is pretty important for the decreasing. Now it's a little bit flexible. If you're off by just a couple of stitches, it will be okay. The main goal is that we want to have a multiple of 2 for this. So if you end up with 118 or 122 or something like that that is a multiple of 2, then you shouldn't have any issues. Finishing up round 7, we just want to join with a slip stitch to that top chain, or that 3rd chain from the previous round. And now we'll just move right along to round 8. So for round 8, we just need to chain 2. And we're going to be working in post stitches. So we're going to do the front post and the back post double crochet. So normally when we're working into our stitches, we use the V, or these top 2 loops, to work our stitches, but post stitches are a little bit different. We're still going to yarn over like we normally do. We want to make that first stitch a front post double crochet. So what I like to do is just kind of take my middle finger, push that stitch out a little bit, and I'm going to insert my hook behind the stitch. So just directly behind the post, and just work my double crochet as normal. And then we want the next stitch to be a back post double crochet. So we'll yarn over again. We're going to come in from the back side and then catch that post, go back out the other side, and then finish off your double crochet. Now, sometimes the back post double crochet can be a little bit difficult to work. As you see, the loops just fell right off my hook, and that happens sometimes. You get used to it the more you work this stitch. So we're going to alternate front post and back post just like we did here. So the next one is going to be a front post double crochet. And the next a back post double crochet. And then we'll just repeat that all the way around. Okay, when you've made it back around, we're going to join with a slip stitch to that second chain that we created. So there's the first chain, the second chain is right here. So we're just going to join with a slip stitch. Now, after completing round 8, you should notice a pretty big difference in the overall shape of the hat. Now, it should actually be starting to take shape a little bit. So we talked about how it has a little bit of rolling around the edges after you finish round 4. And once you add basically this front post, back post alternating round, so round 8, it really starts to smooth things out and it starts to kind of come up on the sides. So for round 9, we're going to make a pretty drastic decrease. And it's actually, I think, a little bit simpler than decreasing how we normally do. So we're going to be using front post and back post stitches again. So we're going to chain 2. And the first stitch we want to make is going to be a front post, but we're going to front post 2 together. So front post double crochet 2 together. So the way we do that is we just want to yarn over again, and we'll grab this first front post, so this is the very first stitch, and just make your half of a double crochet. So we'll yarn over, pull through 2, and then we'll leave those 2 loops on our hook. And then we're going to skip this back post double crochet, and we're going to find that next front post double crochet. So we're going to finish that off by making another, so we'll do a half of a double crochet, so yarn over, pull through 2, and then when we have 3 loops on our hook, we're simply going to yarn over and pull through all 3. And it doesn't look like much at first, but it should kind of form a little V. And then we're not going to ignore this next back post. We're going to go ahead and back post double crochet into that next stitch. So that's just like normal. And then we're going to find the next 2 front post double crochet. So right here and here, and we're going to front post double crochet these 2 together. So just like before, skipping that back post and then working the next. And there we have it. So your work should look something like this, and by the time we're finished with this round, we're going to end up with 60 stitches. So we are decreasing the number of stitches in half. So we'll go ahead and back post double crochet into the next, and then front post double crochet 2 together for the next 2 front posts. So that's the repeat for round 9. We'll just go ahead and finish that up real quick. When you made it back around, we're going to join with a slip stitch to that second chain again, so the top one there. And now we're ready to move on to round 10. Rounds 10 through 15 are going to be exactly the same. However, round 10 is going to look and feel a little bit different just because we're working with these little groups of V stitches there, or where we double crocheted 2 together. So to begin round 10, we're going to chain 2, and we're going to make a front post double crochet around this group. So we just want to insert our hook from one side and come back out the other, and just make sure you've got both of those stitches there caught underneath your hook, and then just finish off your double crochet. Then we want to make sure we back post double crochet around this next one. We don't want to skip that. And that's going to be very similar to what we've been doing. And then now we've come up to a group there of 2, so we just want to catch both of those. And that's the repeat for round 10. We just want to repeat this until we've reached the beginning of the round. Once you've made it back around, again, we're just going to join with a slip stitch to that second chain. Rounds 11 through 15 are still going to be alternating front post and back post double crochet, only this time it's going to be a little bit easier to see where you need to work. So what we need to do at this point is just finish up rounds 11 through 15, and again we just want to alternate front post and back post double crochet in every stitch, and so we front post where we have a front post and we back post where we have a back post double crochet. And when you get finished with round 15, come back to this video and we'll have 2 more rounds to work, and then we'll be finished with our hats. Once you have finished up to rounds 15, your band should have a nice ribbing pattern like you see here, and we just have 2 more rounds to finish off our hats. So round 16, we need to make a single crochet border around the entire piece, so we're going to start off with a chain 1, and then we're just going to make 1 single crochet into every stitch. Now sometimes it's a little bit difficult to know exactly where you're supposed to work your single crochet stitches, and I would recommend maybe turning your work up so that you can see the V's and then you know exactly where you're supposed to work. Now our stitch count is going to be exactly the same for this round. We should have 60 stitches, 60 single crochets. Once you've finished round 16, you just want to find your chain 1, which you can see right here, and we're just going to join with a slip stitch to that chain 1. Now, it's a little bit difficult to work into. Okay, and at this point we're ready to start working on the very last round, and we're going to be working the reverse single crochet for round 17. So we're going to start off similarly with a chain of 1. But when we do the reverse single crochet, we just go in the reverse direction that we're used to. So I'm just going to move my hook back, and I'm going to find that first stitch. So this is the first stitch I want to work into, and I'm just going to insert my hook into that stitch and then yarn over and pull up a loop and yarn over and pull through 2. So we're doing the same motions that we do for the single crochet, but we're just doing it in the reverse direction. And when we do that, we create these little bumps that you can't really see for the first couple of stitches, but once you get 5 or 6 of them, then you can really start to see the pattern emerge. This is one of those stitches that takes a little practice. It's somewhat awkward to work in the reverse direction from what we're used to, but I think it's worth it. Okay, now that I've made a few, you can kind of see that ridged edge start to form. So that's what we're looking for with this round, and so we're just going to repeat this until we've reached the beginning again. Once you've made it all the way around, we're just going to go ahead and join with the slip stitch. Now I just like to do so from where this first stitch occurred. So just insert my hook and do the slip stitch as normal. Okay, and once you get that finished, we are done with the crocheting portion of this hat, so we can just go ahead and bind off. And I'm just going to pull that tail through the loop on my hook. And now you want to go ahead and grab your darning needle, and we're going to weave in this tail. So we've already woven in the tail at the very beginning, so we just have this one left to deal with. So I like to turn it towards, so the inside, I like to weave it in from that direction. So I'm just going to work it down, and then I like to conceal the tail under this post row here, so where all these post stitches are. Okay, and at this point our hat is all done. So we're going to talk really quick about blocking this hat, because that's probably something you're going to want to do. So what I have here is just a standard dinner plate, something that you can just find in your kitchen. And we just want to start working the beret onto the dinner plate. So this is a really good blocking method. It's actually going to stretch out the stitches. And if you made your gauge a little bit too small when you worked the star pattern, then this is going to help correct that. Now you want to make sure you have this on there even. So once you get it wrapped around, then you can just sort of work with it. And then if you flip it over on the front, you can kind of get a better idea of whether it's even or not. So as you can see, the gauge for mine was pretty small, and you can kind of tell that by looking at how big the spaces are in between the stars, but it actually works out pretty well. And once you have this on here, there's no need to pin or anything like you normally would when blocking a project. You just want to completely saturate this with water and let it dry for at least 24 hours, or if you're in a hurry, you can dry with a blow dryer on a low setting, a low heat setting, and that will complete our beret. So again, this is an optional step. If your hat turned out a little bit too small for you, then I highly recommend doing this. It'll probably correct that sizing issue. This concludes our tutorial for the Starburst Beret. Stay tuned for more free patterns and video tutorials at BHookedCrochet.com.